I'm Aryeh Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr show where it's all about the W. This season has been going 100 miles per hour, and I'm hyped to dive into the action with the great Lyndsey D'Arcangelo. You already know her, so let's get into it. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our staff's amazing written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. And remember, downloading the episode makes our stats better and your listening experience better, which allows us to continue doing this important work. Lyndsey D'Arcangelo, welcome to the show. A friend of the show, a friend of mine. How are you?
I'm good. Talking some basketball, so I'm always good when we're doing that.
Oh yeah, I'm so grateful that we can have you as a recurring guest on the show because I always enjoy our little chats. We have a fun one today. We're gonna get going. Let's just hop into it. Lots of happenings in the W early on in the season. Let's touch on some big topics. I think we'll disagree on some things, but as always, I think respectful disagreements and debates around the W just grow the game. And one day I will not feel the need to preface stuff with that. But before we get into it, why don't you remind everyone where they can find your writings and where they can see your Twitter thoughts?
Yeah, so I read about women's basketball in the WNBA for The Athletic. I also am going to be doing the same for Just Women's Sports. That just was a new development that happened last week, so I'm excited about that. And you can find me on Twitter at Darkangel21. That's DARCANGEL21.
Your Twitter handle sounds like an old school comic book superhero, and I like it. But enough about that. Let's talk about a hot topic that was blown up the Twitter sphere, Twitter world, whatever you want to call it, over the past few days. Tina Charles goes 3 games in a row, dropping 30 or more points. There's not many WNBA players who have done that. It's an amazing feat. I want to tip my cap to her, give her all the flowers for this. But it started an interesting kind of snowball effect of the discussion, which probably realistically we're too early to have the discussion. Some teams have only played 2 games. But can you ever be too early for a way too early debate? I don't know. Who knows? The MVP discussion. There's some players who are standing out. There's only 2 teams sitting right now in the WNBA who have a winning record. 3 teams. Sorry. The Seattle Storm, the New York Liberty, and the Connecticut Sun. And while I vehemently am against the idea of you just pick the best player or the best stats player on the best team in the league, it does kind of open the door for an interesting discussion of the MVP race. Now, my assumption is that you think Tina should be included in this, and I'm completely basing that off of a tweet that I think I saw you tweet. Tell me your thoughts on the MVP race.
Yes, I did do a early WNBA MVP watch list that I tweeted out today. And, it's like you said just a moment ago, the healthy debate is good. It's good for basketball. It's good for women's basketball. It's good for any sport. It's nice to have these conversations and we can disagree. And, it's a topic of conversation that's fun. As far as Tina Charles goes, so just looking at stats and whatnot today, and this could her whole offensive run here could change once Deladon comes back, right? Um,
Yeah.
because the ball won't be in her hand as much as far as opportunities go, but she is playing very well. She's on is it 3 games now? She's got 30 plus points. If she gets another one, the only 2 other players in WNBA history have done that, Maya Moore and Aryeh Ogunbowale. You can double check my stat on that, but I believe I saw that earlier today.
I believe you're right.
So that's good company right there, and she's averaging 26.2 points per game, but also 8.4 rebounds. So it's not just about the point total. Her her win share is, I don't know, right in the pack with other players like Jewel Lloyd and Jonquil Jones and Duana Bonner and Sabrina Ionescu. So she's playing well, and if this is an early MVP race, like you, I just don't look at point total. I think we discussed this last summer when we were talking about MVP.
You and I just always chatting MVP
Yeah,
discussion.
you don't just look at the highest score, right? You look at the point totals, of course, because that matters. But you also I like to look at win share. I like to look at player efficiency rating. I like to look at how else they contribute on the court with their other teams, which would be rebounding, which would be assists, which would be steals, blocks, all that stuff. So I try to look at the all around game, and I think Tina Charles is having a good stretch. Does that mean it will continue? No. I mean, it could very well not. But yeah, so that's why I had her on my list.
No, and I respect that. My thing is just like the whole overall record of the team, and I'll always play devil's advocate to myself of like, I'm not pro, as I said a moment ago, I'm not pro, oh, you're one of the top teams, so you automatically get it, because very often if you're a top team, it's not just because of that one person, it's because of a body of work from that team. So I completely get that. And like, for me, it's hard when you have a losing record. And I will also say that you're much smarter than I, and you use much more advanced stats than I. When me, I look at assists, rebounds, points, overall team record, and then kind of the eye test of, okay, what's going on here? Is she playing amazing basketball? Yes. In my mind, is she in the discussion? No, because in my mind, and now someone's going to definitely go back to that last episode we did and like show the receipts of me saying something very different. I'm calling it now. But in my mind, it's like a 3, maybe 4 person race. And if I'm going to be honest, if I look at it, I just think Jonquil Jones, Benijah Laney, Brianna Stewart, and honestly, like I could even say, if I could pick one more person from each of those teams that I want to include in the MVP race, before in my mind I would go to Tina Charles. But again, I'm falling, into my own trap of doing that for the teams at top of the rankings. For me, it's just like Tina Charles is the same old story of her putting up some great stats while, back in New York, what was she doing? She was playing some great basketball, some would argue, but she was playing, in my opinion, great basketball where there wasn't the team around her and other people weren't producing, or at best one other player would produce, which is basically what we've seen now. I agree, though, with what you're saying of like, obviously these stats probably aren't going to keep. And if we're talking about it just in the sense of at this day and time, should she be in the discussion? I get where you're coming from. Personally, it's just not my flavor. I don't know what the right term right there is.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. Do you think there could be an MVP on a team that is not doing so well? And I don't mean from a standpoint of like, let's say they're still making their players around them better. They're still affecting their game. They're having that overall impact, but the team record is not. They're not one of like say the top 3 teams in the league.
Yes, 100%. And in fact, I feel like this is what is gonna bite me in the butt. Of like last time when we had this discussion, I think I was like very keen on this. Where like, if you look back, I actually did this with Chris Wozniak, our graphics guy at Winsidr. We got into this whole debate, as we often do in the Winsidr Slack page. And we were talking about this, and we went through all of the MVPs, and you look back, and I'm trying to think, there was like, throughout the history of the W, I want to say there was less than 3 times where the MVP was picked not from the top 2 teams.
Yeah.
Maybe there was like a few more, give or take 1 or 2. And looking at that upset me because of what you asked. Like, I fully believe, yes, you can be, in my opinion, you can be the MVP of the league and not be a top 3 team. Now, I think, in my mind at least, the lower you get in the rankings, the more you individually have to be doing, right? So, like, if you're not a playoff team, you better be setting record, like, set the record for most points in the game, setting records in like left, right, up, down, whatever. if you're in that window of like the 8th seed to the 6th seed, you still got to be on that ridiculous level, which right now I think the Mystics are right around the 8th seed if the playoffs started today. Obviously, still insanely early to say that comment. So yeah, I just think that the ask, kind of like the bar is set that much higher for players who aren't in those top 3. But I would love flat out to see a 4 or 5 seed team get an MVP, because I think too often and I'll call myself on this, like I'm part of the WNBA media. I just think too often WNBA media, I can't say media today, gets into this, quicksand trap of how good the top teams are playing, and typically one player is like orchestrating or just mind-blowingly good, and we have a sour taste in our mouth when we see worse teams. So this is my way of saying, like, my head's all over the place. What do you think? Do you think it has to be? I mean, obviously no, but I'm curious to like full on win one. Do you think that it should be a requirement to be a top 3, or what's your take on it?
No, I don't. But then you have the argument, like I think some people were stomping for Aryeh last season, right? As one of the did she finish as the top scorer for the league last
I
season?
believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so there you have a player who's balling out, but it didn't translate. It didn't translate in the standings. It didn't translate in wins. They finished. What did they finish last year? It was like 8 or 9. They finished ninth last year. So so yeah, I mean that you have. So what do you do there? Well, then that's when I think you do have to figure in and what the impact they have on the rest of the team. I think it does come into play at some point, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like the top 1, 2, 3 teams. Like I do think there could be an MVP in those mid-range teams.
Yeah.
Especially when you have records that are so similar and there's kind of some parity in that middle pack. Um, so so yeah, but I think as far as like lower like maybe 10, 11, 12, I think it would be very hard um to have make a case for an MVP on the maybe the bottom 4 teams.
Well, I mean, to echo what you're saying, one, I think the middle with like there's no tiebreaker. You know what I mean? Is in the
Mhm.
sense of it. Typically, if we're talking making a playoff seeding, yeah, there's a tiebreaker, and I'm sure the WNBA voters, there's a tiebreaker in each person's individual mind. But I fully expect at the end of the season, we're going to have a huge grouping of teams with extremely similar records, and there's going to be a lot of tiebreakers. So that kind of, adds to what you're saying of with similar records, how do you differentiate? But then also to what you're saying of this idea of win shares, because your value to the team is an important aspect, where I think that's an aspect that I personally, I'll call myself on it, don't look at enough, in the sense of saying, okay, well, if we take this player out, what happens to this team? And that kind of drop off of what is that player's impact? What is that player's, to be punny, value to this team? I think is a huge aspect of it. But all right, cool. We've talked MVP race. Unless you got some final thoughts, I got a next topic for us.
Well, we didn't. We only talked about Tina. So, do
That's
you
a good
want to
point.
give me your top 3, and then I'll give you my top 3.
Okay, so my top 3 are Jonquel Jones, Benijah Laney, Brianna Stewart, and I personally I had up until the game last night where Brianna Stewart and Jonquel Jones battled it out. I personally had Benijah Laney higher up. I
Mm.
had her as my number 1, and Jonquel Jones as like a very, very close 2, and Brianna Stewart a distant third. Not distant in the sense of like, just in the sense of I felt that it was Benijah and Jonquel like neck and neck. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
when you're watching a track meet and they're coming in from TV, you can't tell who won until they show the replay of crossing the line. Who are
Mhm.
who are your top 3?
So I have similar. So Jonquel is my top. Benijah would be second. Brianna would be third, and I kind of have Sabrina's like my dark horse. She is impacting that team on so many different levels. And just when she's on the floor, from assists, like the rebounding, the points, just directing the offense. She's just having a really incredible impact. Not that wouldn't have expected it, but so she's just kind of lingering in the background for me for right now.
No, I
Just
agree.
because of everything she does. But what I like about Jonquel right now is just the the across the board breadth of the way she affects the game. And it's a bit more than Benijah. I know Benijah's just taken over and putting up points, and she's got she's become this go-to player for the Liberty, which is amazing, and I love to see it. But Jonquel, man, I mean, rebounding, blocks, three-point shot, even from an assist standpoint, like she's just playing so well.
It's and she's so elegant and smooth.
Oh yeah, her even from 3-point, like it's it's like the rhythm of it. It's so like, oof, it's
It's like
beautiful.
music, honestly. Like watching last night, the way that she just the flow of her getting her shot up from three is just it's art. It's beautiful. Say what you want. I would watch
Hmm.
like just clips, not even the like how they do the highlight videos. People will
Hmm.
do like training videos, and it's like they put the ball up and then it cuts to like the ball going in the hoop. I would
Yeah,
just watch the first cut, just her getting like
her getting the shot
emotion.
up. Yeah,
Yeah, it is so beautiful, and
it
I agree with
is.
you. I agree with
It's
you. I guess the thing leaning me towards Benijah is more so going back to my debate with Chris when we were looking at who's won MVP. It's like almost always a big,
hmm
and to see somebody who, in my mind, Benijah was one is like obviously they're different players, right? But like on defense, the style of impact that Benijah has versus Jonquel is so different, right? You're not going to be putting Jonquel on a guard. I mean, obviously she's going to get switched there sometimes, and she's capable, and you can run past her, but she's got those go gadget arms, so she can probably get from like 10 feet away. But like Benijah, like in my mind, when I look at Benijah Laney, and this is kind of out there, but stay with me, it's almost as if we saw an Elena Beard player who is that impactful of like, I'm going to put you on their best player type defender, but also doing that on the offensive side. And so for me, it's just to not have a big, and that's obviously a bias that I have because I'm 6 feet and never played big. So if Rachel was here, she'd be telling us that I'm crazy. It should be John Quell. But that's kind of where I'm coming from on that. What are your thoughts on like a non-big maybe getting a leg up because of the history of the bigs winning?
Yeah, I don't know if it's just that. I think maybe they're in a position to just impact the game more from like getting rebounds and blocks and points, like just to have stats across the board, which I like to look at as far as MVP goes. But I don't know. I think it's just with Jonquel and what she's able to do at her size and her height and how agile and athletic she is and how that shows all over the court. I just there's really no she's got the leg up for me.
Cool. Well, let's move on. A perfect segue to the Connecticut Sun. They're starting off hot. And I am going to shame myself for honestly, like going into the season, we talked about this a while back. I think when we had you on the episode last time, it was you, me, and Rachel talking. We were talking about Connecticut, and correct me if I'm wrong at any point, obviously. But I just feel that like we had those questions. We hadn't seen Bonner and John Quell play together. We didn't know
Mhm.
how Brianna Jones and John Quell were going to play together. It was a lot of question marks. Most of the questions have been answered. I also, as amazing as it is for John Quell's ability to play inside and out, same with Dewana Bonner. I gotta say, it's kind of amazing to see this Connecticut Sun team, which is kind of like a fusion of new age basketball and old age basketball. Old age basketball sounds weird. Shouldn't have said that. But a fusion of like the different styles of basketball, of the different evolutions of basketball that we've seen. What are your thoughts on this fiery start for the Connecticut Sun?
I think, they I will be honest and I'll own this. They were kind of in my blind spot. I wasn't really looking at them, and for no other reason that it just I didn't think they were gonna do this well, but I didn't think they were gonna do horrible either. I just didn't see them as this like coming out. with an undefeated streak, and then just losing a close one to Seattle. But um, they share the ball so well, and their game is so fluid. Um, they have 4 players averaging, double figures. It looks, just looking down the roster, you could see there's contribution from pretty much almost everyone on the roster, except except for Alyssa Thomas, who isn't playing. So, um, yeah, it's odd. They just play such great team basketball, and the way they share the ball, the way they get the ball in everybody's hands, and it's, when you watch their offense, it's just like, it's kind of like poetry in motion, right? It flows so well. It's like, just like we were talking about John Quell's jumper, but it's kind of, it's fun, and it's beautiful to watch. So just their offensive their offensive game, I guess, isn't that surprising to me. I guess what I'm more surprised about is just their defensive game, and how well they've been playing on that side of the ball.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, we all know the Connecticut Sun for a long time are going to be a defensive-minded team. Honestly, I don't know which side I was more curious, confused, scared about for them, because going into it, I was like, okay, but Bonner, Jones, and Jones, like, how is that going to work? How's the spacing going to work? And it's been beautiful. They're not allowing a lot of second chance points. They're controlling the paint. Obviously, when you have such length, such height, you're going to have that advantage. But somebody who's really stood out to me over the past few games has been Natisha Heidemann. I mean, averaging 12.7 points a game. She was the confidence. I assume you watched the game last night. If you didn't, rewatch it. Fans, rewatch it. Because Natisha Heidemann in the first half, maybe it even went into the third quarter. I'm blanking on when, not to spoil alert, she got a little injury. Haven't seen an update on that yet, but the confidence she had shooting the ball was unmatched, right? Like, she just looked next level, controlled, cool, and confident in just her third season. I just want to recap this. In 2019, she starts 0 games. She's getting around 10 minutes per game, shooting 41% and 46% from 3. Okay, she's getting 3.7 points a game. Next season, she goes up to 18 minutes. She's shooting slightly lower on all those percentages, but she's now getting double that with 6 points. And now, 6 games in, she started 5 of them. She's averaging 12 points in 33 minutes. She's shooting 42%, which is a career high, 39% from 3. The biggest question is definitely the free throw, dependency or consistency from her. But what are your thoughts on Natisha and just what she's been able to do early on in this season?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we're looking at a possible most improved player right there, year over year, and I think her getting the chance to slip into a starting role and, like, just really, shine, and get a chance to, like, play her game has been fun to watch, and she fits right in, like, seamlessly in that role. The other thing about the Sun is you talk about their length, well, their rebounding has been off the charts. I mean, they get the second chance points is what kills teams the most, and they're averaging 11.3 offensive rebounds per game, and their opponents are only averaging 6.8. So there's that's a big gap, and then you have they're holding their opponents to 10 less points per game, 72.3. So yeah, they're just everything's clicking. Everything's clicking for them right now.
Well, John Cole Jones, I don't know why no one's checked her hands for Stickum yet, because some of the rebound, and not even just the rebound she gets, but some of the passes that her teammates throw her down in the paint, you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, no, all right, I've trained myself to never say this again. But when the ball's going in, you're looking at it and you're like, there's no way she could get that. That's like way too high for her. And she's got the go-go gadget arms. I mean, it's really ridiculous, and that's why we continue to talk about Jonquel Jones in the MVP race. I mean, right now they're seeded number 1 because they have the tiebreaker. But I mean, this team is just it's fun to see this, and I'm so happy to it. Like, almost, because I was so sad going into the season knowing that we're going to be entering the third year of DeWanna Bonner's contract with the team before we even have the chance of seeing Bonner, Thomas, and Jonquel Jones all together. But just seeing them play so good early on has just, honestly, it's made me happy. So that's all I can ask for. Any final thoughts on the Sun?
Well, you make a good point. I mean, imagine them with Alyssa Thomas. You know, I mean, it's kind of a scary thought.
It's a very scary thought, but here's the thing. And call me crazy. I don't want to say that the team is better without Alyssa Thomas, because I don't mean that at all. But I think they might not have gotten off to the same super hot start because they've given the ability, having Brianna Jones gives the ability for Jonquel to space out a little bit more. It gives the ability, they can kind of take rotation. Now, Brianna Jones' ability to kind of do her best Alyssa Thomas impression and get the ball at the top of the key and do some spin moves, drive down, whatever, has been really impressive this season. I don't think I gave her enough credit for it last year. Maybe she just didn't do it enough last year. But I do question, and maybe this is going to be the problem all offseason after this year, right? Whether they win the championship or not, it's going to be, okay, but how are they going to mesh back together with Alyssa Thomas after Jones's blowout season? I think that's going to be an interesting aspect for the talking heads to kind of wrap our head around, because in the same respect, like, I know I'll speak for myself. It was really hard for me to, after what we saw last year with the will and domination of Alyssa Thomas and like carrying her team to where they went, it was like painful in my mind to imagine the shift of bringing in Jonquel Jones and losing Alyssa Thomas. Maybe I'm alone in that. I don't know.
I love the way your mind works, though.
It's like say something, then immediately try and poke a hole in it and attack myself. So,
right. Oh man, you're funny.
Any final thoughts on Connecticut before we talk about the closest team to? I believe the closest team to you. I don't actually know because I don't know Northeast geography.
Yeah, they would. Well, we're all good on the Sun, but yeah, the Liberty would be the closest team.
All right, sweet. Well, perfect segue to the New York Liberty. Tough start to the season. I mean, I don't think somebody put down 5-1 and a big amount of money on it, and they're cashing out right now for the New York Liberty. Quick update: Liberty's medical staff has determined after the injury to Natasha Howard, she will be unavailable for about 4 to 6 weeks. The expectation is. Talk to me about your thoughts on the New York Liberties. I couldn't think of a good pun about the New York Liberty in this hot start, but go for it.
And their liberation, perhaps.
Ooh.
Yeah, just trying to throw that in there. So yeah, so in my preseason rankings, you didn't really know what to expect, right? They got some new pieces. They had Natasha Howard come over, and of course, unfortunately, she is now injured. But and Sammy Whitcomb. So they had some new pieces, and Sabrina's back. So I wasn't sure. So I had them ranked 11th actually in my preseason rankings, just based on last year and just the unknown. And did they blow that out of the water? I mean, my goodness, it's just they are playing such great basketball, and it's like you can tell that there's no one player that's kind of just like, I'm just going to take this over. I know we talked about Benijah and how well she's playing offensively and she's leading the team in scoring, but it's not all her, and it's not all her, just doing it on her own. She's getting open. They're getting her the ball. Sabrina's distributing the ball well. They're playing good team basketball. But then, also on a defensive point, I mean, they're not the biggest team in the league. And they're playing pretty good defense in that regard. So I think overall it's been a surprise. Am I wrong?
No, it has to be a surprise, and I'll echo what you said. It's not been one player taking over, but the reason that I kind of give the nod to not Sabrina, but Benijah is because the thing that I've loved about this team early on, and the thing that I think has surprised me most is their confidence. They're not playing like a team, to what you said, that just had all these new pieces come in. They're not playing like a team that not only did all these new pieces come in, but the leftover pieces from past seasons are pretty young pieces. Like everyone they're having fun. They have confidence in each other. and trust in each other. And I think that's a huge element of what's been working defensively. But back to Benijah, I just feel when they've struggled or where they've hit those moments of struggle, she's been, not always, but often she's the one to answer the call. And it's been really impressive to see her do that for a number of reasons. But that's why she kind of, in my mind, is that standout player. But someone who brings the hype, Dee Richards has done much better than I expected from her. Right? And that's not a knock towards her. Jazz Jones, somebody who I have to give credit to my wife, Anna Lane. She, last season, was watching a Liberty game while I was cooking dinner and was like, Aryeh, stop cooking. Come over here. I just rewinded. Watch this play. This is a player you need to keep your eye on. And I've just been a flat-out Jazz Jones fan ever since because she just has that it factor, right? Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say about the Liberty. Like, I did not expect them this high. I thought they'd be fighting for a playoff spot. Did not think we'd be talking about them, 6 games into the season for a few teams, talking about them being 5-1 and a tiebreaker away from being the number 1 team in the league. Do I still have my question marks? Yeah. Do I still think that they're going to hit some rough patches in the season? Yeah, every team is going to. And how you respond to that kind of makes up the story of the season. But wow, I mean, is there somebody? Kylie Shook. I mean, there's just a lot of players who are playing their role well and fitting in and doing better. Like, I don't want to say best of their ability because that's almost demeaning, and I don't want to say better than their ability because that's even worse. They're out punting the coverage is the only metaphor or simile I can think of. They're just blowing me away, and I keep waiting for that one game where I'm like, all right, finally, here's the struggle. Like, but they haven't had it. And honestly, watching them, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, watching them, it can't help me but think of, like, the WNBA season is so short that if you get on a hot start, right, like, you can power through a bunch of games. And I guess I'm just more shocked that we haven't seen more teams go from really bad to really good just because they get that confidence of a hot start and are able to run through and just, like, shocker, we just won the championship.
Yeah, to echo what you said about their role players, just knowing what their role is going in and getting that done. I think Dee Richards is a perfect example of that. When she goes in, and even she's only averaging 10 minutes per game, but those are impactful minutes, and you see it. You see it happening on the court, whether she gets a steal, makes a good dish, scores a bucket. She's making those plays that they need when the starters are on the bench, and they're. I don't know exactly what the system is that Walt Hopkins has them in because I don't look at it from that and like the analytical mind or whatever where I could name it right off the bat. But man, what he has them in is working, and it's working for them. It's playing to their strengths, and they're just they're another team that just has found that chemistry right off the bat. And that's really hard to do when you have new pieces. You think it would take a couple games to kind of sink in, but they've got it. They like playing with each other, and they like playing for each other. You could see that.
Support for the Winsidr Show is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your personal space. Manscaped just launched their 4th-generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. You heard that right, 4.0. Join over 2 million men and women worldwide who have trusted Manscaped. With this exclusive offer, you can get 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code WINSIDR20 at manscaped.com. I'm one of the first to try the new Lawnmower 4.0, and I'm blown away by the performance. The craftsmanship and detail are next level. Manscaped engineered the ultimate body trimmer by focusing on intelligent, functional, and incredibly comfortable grooming experience. Their 4th-generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. I now feel confident in safe shaving, and so will you. The Lawnmower 4.0 even allows you to customize your trim through additional guard lengths, sizes 1 through 4. And did I mention wireless charging? The new wireless charging system helps the battery length last longer. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code Winsidr20 at manscaped.com, and trust me, you won't regret this.
And honest, this is such a weird connection, but for some reason I'm connecting them to the Atlanta Dream when Nikki Collin first got there, and they went on that crazy run, and they were like the number 1, number 2 team most of the season. Not to say that they're going to have like a fall off, but in the sense of like when it clicks early on, you can really ride that for a while. Well, I think we've talked about the Liberty a good amount, but on the flip side of a different team that the role players have maybe struggled a little bit, the Chicago Sky. Possibly, I mean, I think it's easy to say a disappointing start to the season. They're ranked number 5 currently. They've only played 4 games, which is a point we'll get to in a little bit. So it's a little bit hard when we're talking about teams that have played 6 games, and then teams that have played 4 games, and then teams that have played 2 games. Yes, there are some teams who have only played 2 games. It's interesting because for me, the Chicago Sky and we shameless plug. We had Clea Copper on the podcast this past weekend, and I was talking to her because the Chicago Sky, since James Wade has taken over, historically, it's only been a couple seasons, but they always start off so hot and then hit this rough patch. And I asked her about that, and I was like, how do you guys start off so strong? And her response was, honestly, training camp with James is insane. When you finish training camp, you look at the first couple games, and you're like, oh, those will be easy. There's no way it will be as hard as it is. And now I haven't let that sink in to think about how that computes to the rest of the season, but talk to me about your feelings on the Chicago Sky. Obviously, injuries have hampered their team.
Yeah, I think they're underperforming from the preseason expectations that we all had, and obviously Candace Parker is a big piece of that. She's only played 1 game, but if you look at their overall stats, I mean, they're in close games. They're averaging 80 points per game, but they're allowing their opponents 79 points per game. They're getting out rebounded on the offensive glass, and they're only shooting 39.6% from the field, which for the amount of good shooters that they have, I feel like that's kind of low on the low side. They're getting the ball stolen out of their hands more than they're stealing it away. They're averaging 18 turnovers per game. That's a lot of turnovers per game. And I just think when we talk about the other teams that are clicking, I think we can say that Chicago is not exactly clicking right now. There seems to be like some cohesiveness that is missing on the roster, and they could be one of those teams that I thought needed a few games to get everything flowing in the right direction. I mean, that could be what's happening right now, but they have to shoot the ball better. They have to play better defense. They have to take care of the ball better. Just a few things across the board.
Well, and I think I believe it was Andy Costable tweeted something out that was like the rankings of points per possession over the past 3 years, and it's been like top 3 or something like that for the past few years, and then this year they're 10th or 11th. So yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that's been the calling card of this team, right? They haven't been the greatest defensive team. Turnovers really hurt them last year overall. I remember talking to James Wade and him just saying, he had a really cool analogy where he was like, a lot of the turnovers were just sloppiness, in the sense of if you're standing one place, Lyndsey, and I'm standing one place, and I'm doing the same bounce pass to you 1,000 times, the first 500 maybe are going to be crisp and perfect, and after a while I'm like, well, I know you're not moving. Why do I need to, put the same effort in? And it starts to get a little bit sloppier, a little bit more lackadaisical. And he kind of used that analogy to express why he felt like they were getting a little bit too comfortable in it, and people started to pick up on that. So shooting percentage, rebounding, and turnovers are huge ones for me. Obviously, when Candace Parker gets back, I think it's going to take care of a few of those, and also the defensive end. And anything else, I mean, for me, it's been a little disappointing. Diamond is Shields, just like every one of her shots just seems like a couple inches off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when someone's consistently shooting and it's always hitting the back of the rim, or it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it's a rhythm thing where because this is a team that should be shooting at a higher field goal percentage. They have good shooters, and I don't know. This just something's off, and it's not one of those things where you try not to get frustrated, and you just you know try to get that rhythm back, that getting your shots to fall, and it's just I mean, they're close. They're only they're averaging only losing like by one point a game. They're scoring 80 and they're giving up 79. So I mean, they're I feel like let me put it this way. I don't feel like it's that complicated of an issue for them to figure out. I feel like they're just things they have to clean up.
Oh, I agree. And also, I mean, let's pull your hand away from hitting the panic button. They're 2-2.
Yeah.
So the number one and the number two team in the league are 5-1. They're one loss behind them, right? So like they still got games to make up to get back up there, which just makes this whole aspect of the season so confusing. And I would love to have a chat with whoever created the schedule because they're just some like it's for us who want to do power rankings, who want to talk about where these teams stack up against each other. It's really hard to say this early on in the season. It's a little bit different if we were mid or towards the end of the season because then you kind of already have an understanding of who these teams are. But hey, it is what it is. Let's talk about my hometown team, another team that's been a little bit of a surprise struggle early on in the season, ranked last in the league. I mean, hey, if you would have told me in 2016 that the LA Sparks and the Minnesota Lynx early on, or not early on, 6 games in for some teams are going to be ranked 11th and 12th in the WNBA in 2021, I would have said, Lyndsey, you're crazy. What are your thoughts on the Minnesota Lynx?
Are we doing Lynx or are we doing Sparks?
Sorry, we're doing Lynx first and then Sparks. I realized that was so confusing. Let's talk about the Lynx because they're 0-3, and then we'll go to the Sparks who are 0-2. The only 2 teams in the league to not win a game yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first thing that jumps out when you're looking at the Lynx is Nafisa Collier, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she hasn't played, and she's a huge part of this team. So that's just it's taking out a key piece, and then again you have some new pieces. You have Aryeh Powers, you have Kayla McBride, and both of them are I don't want to say are carbon copies of each other, but they have similar games, and I don't know. It's another one of those things where it's just something's not clicking. They're only averaging 76 points per game. They're only shooting 23% from 3-point land, and I feel like that's a number that was way higher last season. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
They're averaging 18 assists per game, but their opponents are spreading the ball around more. So I don't know, just kind of I feel like this is another one of those teams where maybe like they're better than their record shows, and it's one of those things that's just going to work itself out.
I agree with many of those points because I like if you show me a list of the teams, excuse me, I don't think I would say that I believe the Lynx are that low.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't even put the Lynx on the same level of the Sparks. All respect to the LA Sparks. I agree. They have their key piece, their assumed MVP candidate, right? If every team has one MVP candidate, you could argue it's going to be Syl. You could also very well say, hey, it's Nafisa's time. But I agree. I mean, it's funny because when I look at this team, I go, well, we're kind of letting in water from 2 ends, right? We're letting in water in the fact that this team defensively, which while they're very athletic, just has not. We talked about trust earlier with the New York Liberty. There's no trust with the Minnesota Lynx, and I think I saw some quotes coming out of Minnesota. Maybe it was Aryeh Powers, maybe it was Kayla McBride, maybe it was Cheryl Reeve who talked about it. I don't have the quote right in front of me. But it was an interesting quote of just basically like there hasn't been trust between us, and you notice players kind of going in to help each other earlier than you should, which leaves a man open. Leaves a woman open. And I think so. Like for me, on the one side, I'm like, oh, this defense is just not. It's just not there, which boggles my mind when you have athletic players like they do, and having the coach that they do in Cheryl Reeve, who last year that was kind of their calling card, right? Like, we're going to be a great defense. It's going to keep us in games for when our offense struggles. And so on the flip side, and there also was a quote I think recently came out of like a media availability yesterday or the day before, where Cheryl Reeve said, our offense isn't clicking, our defense isn't going to be elite, but it'll be much better that's what it was, once we trust each other and once our offense gets going.
Mm-hmm.
So at least that gives you some perspective of what's going on in the camp. Offensively, I have to echo what you're saying. I mean, they're just not, they couldn't buy a three-pointer. Glenn Taylor, A-Rod, could throw all the money in the world at it, and they can't buy a three-pointer this season so far, which is mind-boggling for, somebody who's been a little bit disappointing, but defensively she's starting to step up, specifically in that last Storm game, was Bridget Carleton. She was someone who broke onto the scene. Everyone, if you know Bridget, you know that she's a baller and she can score like crazy. Haven't seen that offensively from her. And I guess a lot of the things that were working last year that we kind of accepted as fact, Crystal Dangerfield not playing like a rookie or a second-year player, right? Playing like an all-star caliber player. Bridget Carleton hitting some big shots. Damaris Dantas hitting threes. I think Damaris has struggled a little bit, but she's still putting up some good points. But then Bridget's struggling and Dangerfield's struggling. What do you think the fix is? Offense or defense, I guess, is my ridiculously long rant way of asking you that.
Well, there's that saying that defense leads to offense and all that. And I think Reeve has always prided their team on her team on good defense. But I think they just they got to start hitting some shots. And once that confidence gets up, after you hit a bucket, you like come back on the court and you're just ready to maybe you're just hyped up a little bit more to play better defense. I feel like that could translate both ways. So once you get, I feel like it could go either way, right? If they get their defense going, and that could translate to offense or vice versa. So I feel like they gotta start with one and get it right, that ship, and then it'll work itself out. But I don't see this lasting. I don't see them going. I don't see them being in the slump for a while. Let me say that.
Yeah, and they're going to play Seattle soon. Which the weird part was when you looked at the schedule, you go, "Ooh, this is going to be a rough start to the season for the Lynx," because they had some tough games to start, and then they play Seattle 2 times in a row. Obviously, there is a little bit of a break. Play Atlanta. It's going to be interesting, and I want to echo not only what you just said about making a shot and playing defense, that you literally just stole the words out of Courtney Williams's mouth. I saw a mic'd up scene with her where she was talking to the team, and she was like, the way we're hyped after we make a shot and we rush back to defense and get up in their face, we need to do that, because when we don't make a shot, we're looking like a sad little preschooler kind of going over because they feel like they're in trouble or whatever, that little walk. You can't do that, and I completely agree with you. I don't expect this to last much longer, but I will caution the Lynx fans and say, you got some tough games over the next few, definitely some winnable ones, and a win against Seattle on Friday could be huge. But the question is, Seattle's a great team. They're at 4-1, sitting in 3rd place. Let's talk about the LA Sparks briefly. Before we got on air, you had a great point about, some flack maybe that some people are giving you, Winsidr, and other outlets or other people who are talking about the power rankings of this team and why it's hard to kind of gauge who these LA Sparks are. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm getting a whole lot of flack, but I did my rankings, and some people asked why the Sparks weren't in last place because they're 0-2, but that's the point. They've only played 2 games. You can't. It's hard, some of these teams, to really gauge where they're at, and even to look at the stats and percentages or whatnot in just 2 or 3 games, because it's more impactful when you have a breadth of work to look at. So the LA Sparks have only played 2 games, and talking about looking at some of these teams that have only played 2 or 3 games, it's really hard to look at their stats and their percentages and really glean a lot from it. Rather than being able to look at a span of 8 to 10 games where there's a larger breadth of work there to really examine. So It's hard to know, like, where they're at. I mean, do I think they've played well? No. I mean, they're averaging 70 points per game and their opponents are scoring 95. And that's, again, over 2 games. But I mean, that's pretty bad. So it could just be the fact that they've only played 2 games. And I think we were talking about this earlier, or actually before we started recording, is that their games have been spread out. So how do you get into a rhythm doing that? Only playing 2 games, having them spread out, and then not really getting trying to. You can't get that on-court chemistry. It's just impossible. So I'm not ready to write off the Sparks. Obviously, that would be crazy since it's so early in the season. But I just think we need to see more from them before we really need to start worrying.
Yeah, and honestly, the only thing that I would add to that is to what you were saying. I think the knee-jerk reaction a lot of people would say is, okay, yeah, they have a 7-day break in between games, but then they get to practice and blah blah blah. Let's keep in mind during COVID, these teams don't have practice squads, right? So their team, it was just announced that Megan Walker tore her ACL, so she's going to be out for the season. And Amanda Zahui B hasn't played yet because of her back issues. So for me, it's like, well, think about this realistically. This team at best is playing some 4-on-4 ball, right? Or different drills, but you can't play a full 5-on-5 game. So even with those 7-day breaks, you're still hampered, to echo and to kind of boost up what you're saying. You're not able to get that chemistry where, like, if we were talking about a normal season where they had these 7-day breaks, fine, maybe I would debate you a little bit on that, of saying, oh well, they at least get to practice together and get that chemistry. But they don't even get that, and it's really frustrating. And I'm sure it's frustrating for them, for their coaching staff, for everyone involved, to have such a gap between games and then go out there and perform the way they did in their second game. So I'm excited to see what we'll see from the rest of the season of them, because I can't assume that they're going to continue this style of play. But then again, hey, too early to count them out, too early to count them in, I would say. Any final thoughts on anything we didn't touch on before we close off this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Sparks, the one thing I'd be concerned about is their offensive production, and where that's really going to come from. Chiney to me has never been like a go-to like scorer, and who's gonna carry that load besides NECA? Is Christy Tolliver obviously has the capability to put up some higher points, but just looking at the roster, I guess that would be my only concern is where's that offensive production going to come from?
You're right. As I always say, Winsidr is our one-stop shop for all your WNBA news and conversation. But we can't do without your help. Become a subscriber at patreon.com/Winsidr. For just a few dollars a month, you can help grow the game. Thank you so much, Lyndsey, and we'll have to have you back.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk again when there's more games played, and we could really kind of, I think, see how things are kind of playing out better. That would be awesome.
Love it.